You're listening to Mr. Allard's Neighborhood. Small town feel with big time ideas. After all, you are entitled to Brad's opinion. Here's your host, Brad Allard.
Well, thanks for tuning in on a rather later edition. We have a big celebrity in town for the show. You don't think so?
You're scraping the bottom of the barrel.
No. We have Chris Wigley here, the new pastor of First Baptist Burleson. Also, as many of us know, he spent many years at First Baptist, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what you want to see, how the church moves forward, things that have changed, things like that. I understand that, I'm sure, but I've been hearing there's going to be some initiatives you have in mind, because that's only appropriate when a new pastor comes in. They have some things that, hey, let's see if we can do this for the community. I know that you and the mayor have already connected about doing some community-related initiatives.
Yeah.
He was telling me about that last week, and I said, well, what are they? Oh, you're just going to have to ask him. Or wait till they're announced or some rubbish like that. But how you doing, Josh?
Pretty good. How about you?
It's a little late in the afternoon. It's about time for my nap usually, but that's okay.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it.
The naps, well, don't worry. You can sleep through this one. Anyway, we're going to talk about all these things, but before we jump on all that, let's talk about our sponsors make all this possible. Thank you to our friend Otto at our place. I bet you've been there more than once. You probably went there before.
It's a great place.
It is.
Good breakfast place.
It really is. And it's, what I like about it, I walk in there. They know who I am. Waitresses know what I want normally, usually for the breakfast. There's several of us in our Sunday school, Dan Gardner and I. We meet there every other Thursday. You're welcome to join us 6:30 if you want to get up that early. I struggle getting up that early, but all these other old men, I was up since 4. I'm like, why?
What's the purpose?
Okay,
of
and I'm going to ask you. I want to ask you this right now. Being a man of the cloth, why do people get up at 5 o'clock to pray when God is 24/7? I mean, it's always like I never understood that. I get up at 5 to pray. I'm asleep 5 minutes later. That's not good.
Pray without ceasing, right?
Yeah, that's what.
Who cares? You can do that at any time, right?
I guess, but still, I'm just saying it just always drives me a bit nuts. Also, he bought Gina's out about a year and a half ago. Have you been to Gina's yet?
No.
Well, you and I remember Gina's differently.
Yeah.
It was an old place and whatnot. He bought it out about 2 years ago, and I believe he opened it up. It's going to be roughly about a year ago now, maybe 13 months, something like that, and it's great.
Oh, wow.
It really is. You and Kathy ought to go there because it has good music, it has good service as always, it has great pizza. It also has a few pasta dishes.
Live music?
On Sunday nights, yes.
Okay.
But no, the music is, old Chicago blues because that's what he really likes. And so it's got that right atmosphere. But on Sunday nights, they have local performing artists. And so it's a big deal.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
We'll have to check that out.
You bet. And it's
Gina's.
Yeah, it is. And it's really good pizza. I mean, and I'm not just saying it just because I'm saying it because, I was just there. What day was it? Friday afternoon, yeah. And that's where I do a lot of my B&I business, my networking group.
Uh-huh.
All right. And also business for the podcast. Also, thank you to Old Pro Roofing and our friend John Williams, 817-734-2756. I don't know if it's going to rain anytime soon, so this is a good time to get your roof inspected because he'll come and check out your roof, and he'll tell you yes, no, maybe, right? He won't be giving you a bunch of, oh, my Lord, your roof's about to fall in. Here's the bill. If your roof is fine, he'll tell you. And I had him come out about 2 weeks ago. He went up there, looked it over, came back down and said, you're good for another year or so.
That's awesome.
Well, it is, and it didn't cost me a thing.
Yeah.
He's part of a networking group, but they don't charge for inspections. But that's what I like about them is that they really are straight up with you about it. They don't try to give you a bunch of razzmatazz about how your roof is going to heck in a handbasket. Also, my friend Jeff Kelly over at the Wethington Agency, he's been on the show. He was on 2 weeks ago talking about Burleson real estate. Now, have you bought a home yet here in Burleson?
No. So we're going to be moving into a rent house while ours is up for sale in Mount Pleasant. So if any of your listeners know anybody looking for a house in Mount Pleasant, I know a good house.
I bet you do. Do you have an agent already?
Yes. Here locally, yeah.
Oh, good. You should talk to me first. No, but Jeff is really good. He knows his business. He sells all over this area. And he was on the show about 2 weeks ago, and we talked about Burleson real estate and the rates. And, Burleson's grown quite a bit in the 10 years he's been gone.
Yes, it has.
And we'll be talking about that. But
well, it's Karen Wethington, right?
It's the Wethington Agency, yes.
Yeah, so, she was very much so active when we were here 10 years ago.
Yes.
And great group
Yeah,
of
it's
people.
part of that. He's part of that group. They're over. I believe they moved in town. They had an office right across from Promises,
Yeah.
and
I think it's still there.
I thought they moved, but who
maybe.
knows? But see, he works almost always out of his home or out of his car, like most agents do. But give him a call at 817-781-0546, and he'll set you right up. Also, this is my buddy Tiffany Jane. She does Local Life Magazine, which is an advertisement. I don't know if the First Baptist advertised in it, but a lot of churches do. I know Pathway's a big sponsor, and we can't let Pathway get ahead of us. So, but it goes to 30,000 homes, and a lot of retailers have extra copies to look over when you're waiting on something or whatever else. And so, check it out. What is today? The 23rd. Your issue should come about a week from Wednesday or so. It's almost always the first or second day of the month that you get it.
Okay.
So I bet the church gets a copy. I mean,
I'll look forward to looking at it.
go give it a look. Okay. I don't know. It really, when you were here, I think it first was getting started. So I don't think you really probably would have been much aware of it. But now it's a lot of people advertising it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Also, Bass Printing and Consulting, one of our members, Al Warner. I don't know if you met him yet, but he's been a member of our church for about a year now, I believe.
I bet I've shaken his hand.
Yeah.
I've shaken a lot of hands.
He's from St. Kitts. He's very distinctive accent.
Okay.
And he is Bass Printing and Consulting. He is over at the Hub, really close to us. And he'll do all your promotional items, shirts, hats, cups, pins, you name it. You can stamp your logo on it. He can do it. And if you want to get a hold of him, it's Alrick, ALRICK, at bassprinting.com or at 817-616-8761. He and John are both members of this networking group I'm in, and it's worked out for both of us. And so what can I say?
That's awesome.
I think that's about it. We have a couple of nonprofits, but I'll do those towards the end so we can get to finding out all about you. Now, first of all, you were here 10 years ago.
Yes, sir.
And you served, I guess, from 2004 to 14, roughly?
2005 to 2015. June of 2005 to August of 2015.
That's pretty precise.
Yeah.
And you were the youth minister.
I was, yeah.
I could tell you, of all the church-related ministries I would personally avoid, it'd be youth. I mean, that to me is the hardest job in the church. I mean, you're dealing with people. I mean, they say, well, you're a teacher, isn't that easy? No, I had the structure behind me to deal with, somebody wants to be a knucklehead. What could you do? You had to just use your charm and good looks to try to persuade these guys to act right.
Well, definitely had the good looks, but I don't know about the charm,
Well,
student ministries, it was definitely a calling, and it's still, I would tell people, it's still in my blood. Once it gets in your blood, it's hard to get out. I mean, I love hanging out with teenagers, even today, so...
But it's if I had somebody that was acting up, I could deal with it. If you have somebody acting up, and you don't want to say, beat it and go to the Methodist or something like that.
That's true.
So
true.
So you have to,
You gotta be somewhat
work
diplomatic,
with them.
yeah.
And I'm sure there's just a lot of hassles, but you're also dealing with that time of your life where a lot of angst and stuff, and I would get that some as a teacher, but you probably got more of it. I mean, most of my students came to me, and we got along great. But I was there to teach school.
That's right.
But they were coming to you for something other than, just Bible learning. They were looking for guidance, advice, consolation, whatever, and you had to deal with all of that.
Yeah, it's being in the position that I'm in. I was a student minister there. Mm-hmm. Now I've come back, and a lot of the kids that were kids back then are now adults and doing really, really great things. And so it's been fun to kind of catch up with them. And what's really rewarding, Brad, and I'm sure you get this even as a teacher. You think, what impact really do you have in that? But now where they're at in this stage of life, they're saying, you were so influential in my life in that time period. That's kind of like a grace of God to be able to hear that,
yes,
because I don't know that you hear that in the midst of the heat of the battle.
I kind of did, but when they were graduating, I'd have some nice things, sent or cards or whatever. But but most of the students, as is appropriate, they would go about their lives, right?
Yeah.
But there's still some students I'm still in contact with all the time, either on Facebook or personally, and so there's that segment of them. But most of them. Most of the kids, I got along great, but there was an end date, and for that type of relationship, and so which is graduation, and whether they wanted to continue that relationship past it or not was up to them. And like I said, I'm very fortunate. I got many people on Facebook that I'm still in regular contact with, and then I see people. When we were having coffee last week, we ran into an old student of mine, an old protege, I guess, of yours, and that happens a lot here in town.
Yeah.
And you see these guys, and look, by definition, a 16 to 17-year-old boy is a knucklehead, okay?
There's no question.
Yeah, they're knuckleheads. But then you see them a few years later, and they're husbands and fathers and career men. It's like, okay. I knew they'd straighten up sooner or later. I'm glad I was around to see it.
Yeah. So I usually got to pick students back up a little bit after you. So your deadline was graduation. Usually I was getting phone calls about weddings and
I've gone to a few
marriages,
of those, yes.
and so that's been a lot of fun to be able to perform those.
I don't know about performing them, but I've been invited to some of the weddings, and unfortunately, I've been to 3 or 4 funerals.
Oh, yeah, that's hard.
Yeah, it is, because they're much younger than you. And you think there's something not right about that.
No, it's not right.
But most of the things have been, I've been invited to a few weddings. I've been invited to a couple of christenings. All right.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. I've been invited to 10-year anniversaries and things of that nature. So it's been a blessing. So I understand the benefits of it. I always thought being a youth minister was a high stress job, and you're also dealing with the parents as well, because they probably want you to save their kid from whatever they're heading into.
Yeah, student ministry is an interesting thing. I used to always say, you get none of the blame and all of the credit. Well, hey, so you look good whenever kids look good, but then you get the blame whenever kids look bad.
Well,
and you never know what the product is of all of that. But you serve anyway. I think my theme verse for ministry is Galatians 6:9.
Oh, you have to quote that for me. I'm familiar with those Galatians. I'm wondering when they're going to get the message. Doggone them, but still, what is that?
It's do not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time you'll reap a harvest if you do not give up.
And if you do give up,
you won't reap the harvest.
Oh, okay, I guess. So after 10 years of doing that, I guess it did help to have stability, because Mike Milburn was there all those years, so you didn't have to deal with instability with the administrative staff and the pastoral staff. And you had David Coucher for a while.
Yep.
I wish he was back in town, tell you the truth, but he had to go to Vernon to take care of in-laws and his own parents. So.
Yep. And I commend him on that. That's a scriptural thing to do.
Yes, it is. And I remember when he left a couple of years ago, he was emotional. All right. But as far as after 10 years, I guess this opportunity in Gilmer must have really just dropped in your lap, because I can't imagine you scouring the Help Wanted pages, if there's such as exists, for ministry.
One of the things that I was grateful for is to have someone like Brother Mike recognize a gift in me in terms of preaching and even pastoral leadership, and taking the opportunity to invest in that, and giving me opportunities to preach, and giving me opportunities to lead and to dream and to do things. And that kind of opened the door to what God might be calling me to, and reshaping my ministry from student ministry to something else. And so that's when a guy I went to high school with, Connor Bales is his name. He's now senior pastor at Quail Springs Baptist Church in Oklahoma City area. And he called. He was at New Beginnings. They were starting a campus, and he goes, "Man, I want to do ministry with you." And I actually told him no. He started calling in February, and we finally went in August. And so he would call once a month and just say, "Hey, why don't you come do ministry? Let's do ministry together." And the more we just talked, and the more we dreamed about launching a campus, it just was appealing to me. When I was in seminary, I was really drawn to the idea of planting a church.
Was it Truett? Do you go to?
No, I went to Southwestern.
Southwestern, okay.
And was just drawn to that, and but I was too nervous to be able to
look
do
at Josh
that.
threw that up there.
There you go, Josh.
Right.
Well done, bro.
Yeah, it'll be you'll see it on the YouTube, guys. It's the quote from Galatians.
And I think that's the exact translation that I quoted. So, but yeah, so it was an opportunity to kind of flex a passion in church planting, but also have the backing of a home church. So it's just a lot of fun. Kind of became a no-brainer, and Learned a lot doing it.
So 3.5 years.
3.5 years there as their first campus pastor of the Gilmer campus at New Beginnings.
And then we were talking before, you went to Mount Pleasant and you were facing a different situation.
Yeah. So again, as the Lord opens up doors, I really began wondering, God, are you calling me to always be in this supportive role, sit in the second chair? Or are you calling me to sit in the first chair? And so I felt like the Lord was calling me there to the first chair. And that's when Trinity opened up. They began calling. Didn't want to leave. New Beginnings, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, not wanting to leave situations. But this was an incredible opportunity. And the church was really struggling. And I didn't realize how bad they were struggling.
Why was it struggling?
Well,
I know you can't gossip about it, but because there's a lot of churches that are struggling.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of internal and external issues that kind of made for the perfect storm.
Yeah, well, Baptists, right? Yeah. So, there's there's a reason why in a town of 600 you'll have 40 different Baptist churches. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And any Baptist church that has the word "new" in it is probably a church break off of something.
Right?
New life or
new beginnings, or
new beginning, a new hope.
Yeah. Well, I know because I've been through churches all my life,
Yep.
and I remember going through a church decline.
Yeah.
When I was towards the end of my high school and into my college years. Very depressing.
Yeah.
And so you go take on this new job, and you're going to have to try to invigorate that church and try to reestablish it in the community and with its current and former members, I'd imagine.
Yeah. So the thing about me is I'm passionate about the local church, Brad. Like, I mean, there's just, yes, it can have its warts and bruises and difficulties and hurdles and everything, but there's nothing like the local church when the local church is doing what the local church is supposed to do.
Which is what?
Is, I think, to engage its community, to extend the kingdom of God. I think a lot of times churches wane because they lose sight of that and they become inward focused. And that is when you highlight more of the what's wrong or what I don't like about a church versus what is our mission, and let's stay on mission.
In my previous example of my youth, high school and college, a lot was theological disputes because that was in the era of you had a heavy charismatic movement going on, and we had a sector of the church that wanted to maintain the old Baptist traditions. You had another sector that wanted to embrace all this charismatic business, and then you had the middle that said, "Hey, let's just get along." And so the old fashioned went back to the old church. We were a plant church.
Yeah.
All right. That had grown pretty well.
Yeah.
But the old timers went back to the mother church, if you will. The new timers, the charismatic and whatnot, formed their own churches and homes and strip malls and whatever else. And the rest of us had to carry on with a greatly diminished budget and new staff and the whole thing.
Yeah. I think so many times the terminology that I've used in church leadership is let's major on the majors, let's not major on the minors. And a lot of times, churches have a tendency to major on small, insignificant, not insignificant, that's the wrong word, but secondary, tertiary theological positions, right? So by doing so, we make a mountain out of a molehill. And to maintain the unity and the fellowship, let's say, well, what's the essential doctrine that we need to say, hey, this is what we have to agree upon? And the other ones we can lovingly debate, but never divide on. I've known churches that have divided on the color of carpet in the worship center, right?
That's the old stereotype, isn't it?
Yeah. So,
I've known churches that have divided over equally trivial things.
Absolutely.
I know that.
And that's unfortunate.
Before you got here a few years, when we decided to go to not only a traditional service, but a more contemporary service, there were some people that were pretty upset.
No, I understand that too.
There was I think 97 or something like that when we went to having two services and one with more contemporary music. And there were some people that are pretty upset by that. And I'm not going to pass judgment on them, but, I think that's very, very common now, isn't it? Having those type of services.
100%. Yeah. The worship wars have been fought, but what's going to be interesting is what is the next worship war?
Oh, who knows? Some people were a little bit reluctant to embrace online and the use of YouTube and whatever else, but I didn't see it in our church as like a big flashpoint. I think also what causes some flashpoints, sometimes, if the pastor is not in tune with what the people need, but they're more in tune with I mean, their own self or their own career, or another way of putting it, I guess, their own theological approach, they can alienate some of the people in the pews. And that's a tough balance to strike, because you don't want to tickle their ears, as Paul wrote, but you
That's
also you got to put it in such a way that they'll come back the next week.
I think what you have to do is you have to say, hey, if first of all, I think pastors have to be close enough to God where they say, God, I'm not going to let you go until you give me a vision. And when God has given you a vision and you're confident in that it's biblically rooted, then you need to try your best to cast that vision, knowing that probably not everybody's going to jump onto it, at least not right away. There may be late adopters or never adopters to that vision and direction, and but you have to say, hey, I'm doing this because out of love. I'm doing this out of being convinced that this is the direction that God has for me, and you move.
Well, some of the things I look back on it now that got people worked up, I think they should have saved their powder for something more important. I mean, people got worked up when some other worshipers in the room would raise their hands, right? And Baptists don't raise hands, right?
Right.
All right. They don't raise hands to volunteer either, but they don't raise it.
That's a whole nother podcast right there, brother.
But I'm just saying, there was a lot of my parents' generation, I guess, they were uncomfortable with people. It wasn't like they were rolling down the aisles, and it wasn't some overtly thing, but raising hands,
right?
Or some people have a more, say, emotionally based, intense worship than the person next to them, made my parents' generation very uncomfortable. And in the small things would also get in the way. We started singing not out of the hymnal but choruses on the screen.
Oh yeah, right. I remember that one as a kid.
Yeah, or out of the bulletin. They'd have the. My dad called them 7-Eleven songs.
7-Eleven. I remember the same 7 words 11 times.
Yeah, right. And so, there's some people say, we bought all these hymnals, we need to be using them, and then that kind of thing. Some people got kind of concerned when some pastors would start incorporating like video clips in their preaching.
Right.
And we know somebody who does that all very, very well, don't we?
Yeah.
Billy Beacham, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He uses it very effectively.
Billy Beacham is like, a pioneer in that area.
Yeah, he really kind of is. Yeah. He really leverages media very well.
Right. And so, but some people, they also got concerned when the suit and ties went away, or the nice shirts, and people start showing up in jeans. Now,
Right.
I agree. I don't want them showing up in, a dirty T-shirt and shorts. I mean, but on the other hand, you want them to show up. But I remember my dad's like, he'd look around and go, you look at these kids, and they're dressed kind of like we are now, or I am anyway. And he's like, they don't even dress up for church anymore.
Yeah, I think it all kind of depends, right? Like, I mean, if somebody's really struggling and they had a rough night or something like that, man, we want them stumbling into the church like that.
Well,
but the perception by many church members is, exactly what you described.
Now, what we're describing, at least what I'm describing, is something from about 3 generations or 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
I think, you go to any church now, and it's kind of uncommon to see a suit and tie unless you're of older generation.
Sure.
And no one makes a big deal about showing up in a collared shirt and decent blue jeans or tennis shoes.
Right.
Things like that. Those things are long past. And I think for the better.
Yeah, I agree.
Much better, because a lot of people who are kind of outside the world that we grew up in and live in now, they think, well, I can't go to church because I don't have the clothes for it. Well,
right.
that can't be an obstacle. Or I can't go to church because I don't know, I sinned last night. Hey, so did I.
Join the club.
Yeah, So
yeah, we all did.
Yeah,
I do think that there's a line to your point though. Reverence for God has to include more than just clothing, right?
Right.
It's a mindset. It's a worshipful mindset that I think that's what the church needs to capture.
And I think the church, all the churches I know of, like Pathway and like First United Methodist, that are pretty active, have really broadened their outreach approaches. They have broadened the way they have, try to reach people in the community that are unchurched. Cindy Rutledge, we are thrilled the Wigleys are back with us.
Hey, Cindy, so good to see you guys.
Yeah.
Of course, that's another former parent, and her daughter, their daughter Jennifer,
right,
was a part. That's so awesome.
Same
good
with
to
my
see
kids.
you, Cindy. Yeah, and your kids too. Yeah,
Hayden
both of
and
your
Sarah
kids.
both. Yeah. And in fact, I'll be seeing Sarah tonight, and she said, I told her, I don't know, Friday, that you were coming, and she's, tell him I said, hey.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. So good to hear from former students.
Yeah. But, we're, as far as back to Mount Pleasant, though, you're having to rescue this church, basically, and you probably had to make some hard decisions about personnel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that must have been really hard.
It was very hard.
And what's the status of that church now?
Man, they're doing great. The leadership there, and really what I inherited, Brad, was fantastic leadership, and a leadership group, and it was an elder-led church, and so it was a group of elders that really wanted to see the Lord do an amazing work, and so really I got to just reap the benefit of that kind of a position, and so we together began to dream and pursue things. I think they were. When we came, it was 125 people or so gathered in worship, and when we left, 650. And we just saw God do some amazing things. And beyond numbers, numerical growth, were really cool stories of God. When a church allows itself to surrender to the Lord's leadership, that's when the Lord works in powerful ways. And you see marriages rescued, and you see people get on track with the Lord. You see people turn from very challenging situations and to pursue the Lord with all of their heart. And those are the moments I live for, right?
Right.
And
it does give you encouragement. But, I also, having a father-in-law that's in the ministry and a brother-in-law that's in the ministry, they're missionaries primarily, but my father-in-law was a preacher for a long time. Not every day is Sunday. Not every day is a great day. And
that's right.
You have to be really resilient.
Yeah.
You got to be committed. You have to be faithful, not just to the Lord, but to your own, what you think the Lord has told you to do. And some days that's harder than others, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is very hard.
I've always had that kind of understanding about the pastoral life because of my father-in-law, because I saw the harder times, when there'd be some sort of issue confronting the church, and he is called upon to make a decision that not everybody's going to like, and that kind of thing, and it's hard.
It is hard.
And if you do it right, so to speak, you'll make a living, but you're going to be living in a budget. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And of course, you hear all this stuff about the mega churches. I'm not even want to get into that because it has nothing to do with us. But it seems like First Baptist and other churches have to overcome that stigma that are sometimes left by these scandalous mega churches, so to speak.
That is very true. That is very true. That's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. Yeah.
We in very few other contexts do we say, well, this person with this particular group did this, and so therefore all the people in that group must be that. So, but when it comes to the church, we have a tendency, I think, to do that as a culture.
They're all like that kind of attitude, and we all know who we're talking about, so we don't need to go down that path. But it's just tough because as a pastor of a big church, you are a very focal point in the community. And on a supernatural level, also, I think that have a big target from Satan.
There's no question.
And I don't really talk about the devil that much because I really talk about God.
Right.
But I do know that you're a target, and I hate to say it that way, but that you are.
Absolutely. The elders that were at Trinity, we used to tell each other all the time, listen, we need each other because we wear targets on our back. By the nature of the position that we serve in the church, we wear a target on our back.
And I hate to put it that way, but that's how I always felt about my father-in-law. And he would take extraordinary steps to try to avoid even the appearance of evil kind of thing.
Yep.
And
that's wise.
Yeah. And same with a couple other ministers I've known of and never friends with. And it's like every day they have to kind of walk that path. And it's tough. And so that's why my prayer for you is that not only those forces be bound and eliminated, or at least or restrained.
Amen.
But that they won't get in the way of your ministry here in our church's ministry. And I'd pray the same for Rick Owen over at Pathway.
Absolutely.
And the pastors at all the churches.
Absolutely.
Because they're all walking that same path.
Absolutely. And, that's the other thing I think that I'm excited about. Having been student minister, now returned, our student ministers back in the day, I call that back in the day. It
back
seems
in
like
the day.
so long ago.
Way back in the day.
Way back in the day. We had really good cross-community connections. We did a lot of ministry together. Well, what's really neat is to see some of those guys now leading as pastors. For example, Landon Dees at North Point and we did a lot of ministry together as leaders in student ministry, and now we get to do it on the adult level, right?
Right.
As lead pastors in the community. In fact, he and I talked on the phone today.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's really kind of a neat deal to continue that.
Well,
that
next time we talk, he has a spot here on the show. I have plenty of open spots, and
Come on, Landon.
4 weeks from now, I'm pretty booked until mid-July. But then after that, I have some open dates.
Okay.
And I haven't had any other pastors, but I've had other church-related activities or representatives, let's say. But you come back, to Burleson. Did we contact you when you found out that Ronnie Marriott was leaving, or did you say, "Oh, Ronnie's leaving"? Get out of my way.
No. So as in any case, people who knew you from the past stayed up with you. Your phone starts blowing up. Hey,
yeah, right.
Did you know our pastor's leaving? You should submit a resume,
right,
and that kind of a thing.
That's what I figured. Somebody had to have contacted you, because I don't know if officially the search committee would have come out and said we would contact you, but I'm quite sure several of the members did before they even had a search committee. So that did happen. That not the search committee, but people reaching out. The way that First Burleson chose to do it, and which is a very valid way, is to hire a executive search firm that focalizes in on senior pastoral leadership and transitions and things like that. And so, which I found to be very helpful for me. Because it wasn't just a couple people on the search committee saying, "Hey, we want this person." No, they really worked through an organization, a third-party organization that combed through a ton of resumes. Well, they kept it pretty quiet because Dan Gardner was on that committee, and he and I co-teach that Sunday school class, and he would tell us in very, very general terms. Well, we got a lot of good people going watching a few sermons, but he never mentioned your name.
Right.
He didn't mention anybody's name.
Well, that was by design.
Right. And we understood that, so we didn't press him very much. But he told us after you were announced how he was almost burdened by it because he knew the very strong possibility you'd be hired. He wanted to tell us about it, but he couldn't.
Right.
But we knew what they went through to find it. And I think it's right because it is after going through a vetting system, if you will.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just, hey, we have an opening, hand it to somebody we know and move out of business. I mean, I think we went about this in a way that legitimized your selection. I guess that's the best way to put it. I mean, no one's going to look at it as like I don't want to call it nepotism, but it's a good old boy network kind of thing.
Absolutely.
You were vetted and you were,
and that was part of the process that the Lord used to confirm in our hearts that this is what He had for us.
And so you go through the interview process and all that. And Dan told us later the kind of questions they would ask about visions for the church and some, I wouldn't say personal questions like when's the last time you cried or anything like that, but but about the family because Kathy here has to pack up the kids and come back, even though a couple are now in college, right?
Yeah,
which is amazing.
Two are in college and one just graduated high school, so we'll have 3 in college.
All at DBU, right?
Yes, so our oldest, Carson, she's actually a nursing student at Baylor.
Right. You betcha. We're both Baylor graduates, by the way, if you haven't noticed that. Yeah.
How many Baylor fans do you have watching you?
Oh, I wish I had more.
Let's see a shout out.
I don't know. At this, most people watch this on their own time, so I don't get a lot of people like Cindy watching it real time.
We'll go back and watch it.
Yeah. Well, it was, on a side note, I was at HEB about 3 hours ago, and I'm walking, I had my hat on, and some guy comes up to me, hey, you going to the game? Which he was talking about the Auburn game. That's who we opened up with, right? Yeah. In about 2.5 months. Oh, you get tickets, blah, blah. And I'm walking to the park, and another guy comes, hey, are you excited about this football season and all this other stuff? So there's a community out there.
Absolutely.
Of course, Miss Kathy is an Aggie, as I remember.
That's her only flaw.
Is she an Aggie or that 2%er?
She would probably be classified as a 2%er. Okay. She doesn't get into all of that. No, she's glad to be a graduate of Texas A&M.
Well, sure. My son kinda is glad he's an Aggie, but he's glad to have the master's degree.
Yeah.
But as far as the kids, 2 in college.
Yep.
One going to college. And what you told me, they took a real good advantage of the dual enrollment programs and stuff like that, which is saving you a lot of money.
Absolutely.
By the way, does the church still have those scholarships for kids going to Baptist schools?
Yes.
Oh, good. Because I haven't heard much about it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, you can apply for it every year. It's in our budget.
It used to be every semester when I was on that
Maybe
committee.
It is every semester.
And DB matches it up to $500.
Yes.
So, I was on that committee with Kevin Stager. That's an old
Oh,
name.
yeah.
Back in '97, we put it together. He and I and about 5 others.
Yeah.
And I just haven't heard much about it. Of course, I'm not in that world anymore. I'm in the over 60 class and that kind of thing. So you come, you get the interview. I can imagine what it must have felt like when they called you up and said, "You got the gig."
Yeah.
So
I was overwhelmed. I really wasn't anticipating that, to be honest. And and so the question then at that point became, okay, is it the right time to leave where we were? Because we absolutely loved Trinity, didn't want to leave. And so really needed to know, hey, what does it look like for Trinity to be without a pastor? And
but my question to you would be then, you go through this whole process, and then it sounds like they offered you the job, and you had to say, I have to pray on it. I figured the praying came first.
The praying's all through it.
Right. But I'm just saying, I would figure by the time they said you got the job, the answer already was yes. But you apparently, even at the end, just holding out, God, talk to me.
You never know, right? Like, what if they would have gone with somebody else, right? I was just kind of thinking, hey, we're going to use this all as part of an affirmation process.
Yeah. Well, Dan told us after this was over that you brought down to you and 2 of the candidates, and those other 2 candidates were high quality. So it wasn't like a no-brainer in a sense. I mean, I think you were the lead and the favorite, but the other 2 were quality applicants. They were good, and they said, Dan said in effect that in any other circumstance, either one of those other 2 would have made really good choices.
Yeah.
So
I imagine.
So you had some competition, I guess is the best way to put it, which is a good thing.
That's always a good thing.
And so you get the job, you say yes eventually, sounds like.
Yeah.
And then I have to go through all that process all over again.
Yeah.
And when you come back, how had the church changed in the 10 years you were gone?
Well, I think that there's been some really great leadership tracks that have been laid. One of those, stark notices is in the rhythms of the staff. Having served here before, knowing what our regular rhythms were and how we kind of operated the culture of the staff, and then being able to see what it is now. And man, it's really a lot of great work has been done there, and a lot of advancement there.
Well, I'm just going to speculate, but Sam Ross did a really good job in the interim.
Yeah.
Some church is going to really benefit from him. I see him as lead pastor.
There's no question.
Sam's going to be a lead pastor someday somewhere.
He is extremely gifted. He thinks like a lead pastor, and he is going to make a church a great pastor one day.
And I was there at the beginning when he and Kelsey started dating. They were in the same class together.
Yeah.
And Sam will be the first to tell you this. In fact, I'm going to see him Wednesday at a Opportunity Fund meeting. He's on and I remember that too. And he'll tell you that he was drifting until Kelsey kind of yanked him by the collar and straightened him out. So
thank God for our wives, right? I mean, we'd be in a heck of a mess without them.
Oh, bless her heart. But now I get these kids. See, that's a good example we talked about earlier. I see these kids and I think, oh my, good luck. And then, but then you see, look what kind of man Sam has turned out to be, and a father and all that. So that's a great thing.
He's fantastic.
But like I said, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to keep him on the reservation, because he's going to want to be a lead pastor. But
and he'll make a good one.
And then of course, I don't know what the internals are, but are we going to change the music program?
No, I don't envision changing that a lot. I do think this. I think if you're going to have a traditional service, invest in that, lean in on that. How can we accentuate that, build that?
That's true, because a lot of churches that have dual services like that, they tend to go with the new and the modern. And the old church, you hear the old jokes, the frozen chosen and that kind of junk. They kind of, it's like, oh, well, we'll keep this around for your old coots, but once you start, going off to your reward, we'll fade it out. But no, I honestly think that traditional hymns and church service has extreme value. I kind of feel badly in some ways for the younger generation from us, because they didn't grow up with the hymns, they didn't grow up with the traditions. And not that they should supersede the message or the gospel, but they are reassuring.
100%. And Brad, I think the next, we talked about it just a second ago, I think the next worship war is going to be kind of pulling back in more traditional, more liturgical style of worship.
You know, I usually go to not the traditional, the modern one, if you will.
Right. Yeah.
But when I have gone to the traditional one still over the last few years for certain reason, I don't know, maybe to see somebody or to see somebody preach or whatever, and they started playing those hymns, and I sang this when I was a kid,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or I remember singing this at, church camp, or I remember at my grandfather's funeral, they sang, how great is thou art, and that kind of stuff. I mean, I kind of wish our younger generation had that kind of attachment, but they don't because they didn't grow up with hymns.
Well, there are some artists that are starting to record the hymns in a more modern way. And so they're leveraging even the melody and the words of the hymn. They're just rewriting it in a different way.
Or doing the Lord's Supper. We've been doing it since I was a kid.
Yep.
And I remember my mom has said you can't take part until you get baptized.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. And when I got baptized, I was 12. But it's like for me, it's like I've been going to church all my life, and my mom says, have you not made a profession of faith to the Lord? I'm like, Mom, I've been going to church all my life.
Yeah.
Of course I have. Well, you need to make it public.
Yeah.
All right, so I didn't have like that Damascus Road experience or anything like
Right.
that. I went down the aisle, got Travis Barry, Brother Barry, drunk, put me into the water, good to go. and then, but it really wasn't until I was about 15 that I understood what that meant.
Yeah.
So when people say when you saved, I'd say probably either 12 or 15.
Yeah.
Because not everybody has that, black and white experience. For me, I grew up in a church. I believed in Jesus. It's time to get baptized. You know, that kind of thing.
I tell people that I think I was saved at age 9. That's whenever I made a profession of faith. That's when I was baptized. But I tell people I think my faith became my own at age 19.
Yeah. That's me, my story. 15 is when I remember coming home from a youth conference. I'm thinking, I want to make sure we got this right, God.
Yeah.
I want to, so this is, I really do believe this. Or, I didn't get baptized because my mama said so.
Right.
And so I think that's when it just was impacted or cemented, a better word maybe, into my heart and that kind of thing. And I've, for better or for worse, I've gone on since then. Sometimes I'm closer to the Lord than others, as everybody is.
Yeah.
And, and I always remember sitting in church as a kid, and they'd have some like reformed Hell's Angel or drug dealer or tattooed felon about how he was, the worst person in the world and got saved. And I'm like, he's so lucky.
I know.
You know,
that was so true. I can remember as a kid going, man, my testimony isn't like a powerful testimony.
Right.
And I remember I was in high school and we were at a camp and a lady who was one of our sponsors talked about how she didn't have a testimony like that. Her testimony is she grew up in church. And she said, actually, she argues that her testimony is even a more powerful testimony in that at an early age, she came to know Christ. And that prevented her from pursuing that lifestyle.
Exactly. That has been the way I presented it all these years. I said my testimony is not a dramatic one. It's what didn't happen more than what did.
Absolutely.
Because it put me in not just a faith relationship, but with other like-minded people my age. When I was a young man in the youth group, at a really good youth group. So, we didn't get involved in a lot of junk. We kept each other out of trouble. And so I didn't have, I was addicted to drugs kind of story, or I got drunk and arrested and thrown in jail kind of story. My story was we played basketball with my buddies and we stayed out of trouble.
Right.
And so that woman that you saw is my testimony also. It's what didn't happen.
Right.
And so I'm very grateful for that. Now, that doesn't mean either I didn't make mistakes. I made plenty.
Absolutely.
And things of the world happen.
And I still make mistakes.
Oh, I know. No, you quit doing that about 3 years ago. No, but it's like, and also events of the world happen, and just because you're Christian doesn't mean they won't happen to you.
Right.
Christians get flat tires.
That's right.
Or have bad things happen to them.
The rain falls on the just and the unjust.
I never understood that.
Yeah.
I always read it, the rain falls on the just and unjust, particularly you, Allard. I got my eye on you.
Well, listen, so when you want to talk about contextualizing that scripture, that was written to a very agrarian society.
Right.
So they viewed rain as a blessing. So blessing falls on the just and the unjust.
Right, but it's like, and of course, as a young man, you wonder, but I'm missing out because all my colleagues, my peers in high school. They're partying and they're having a good time, and they get the cars and the chicks, and I'm going to Sunday school.
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but we know how it ends. We know how it works out.
I've fielded many of those phone calls.
The person either straightened up or crashed, one or two. And so but when you're 16, 17 years old, you're thinking, everybody else seems to be having that fear of missing out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's for real.
So when you come back to the church, we kind of deviated a little bit, but come back to the church, there's a lot of new people, and a lot of people have moved on for various reasons. They've moved out of town, they've changed churches, whatever else. So you really, a lot of the people that you're meeting are for the first time.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've been thrown in the deep end of the pool and remembering names and stuff like that.
Yes. I have this weird feeling, whenever I walk into a restaurant, my head is on a swivel. Who do I know in this restaurant? And do I know you from here, or do I know you from some other place that I've been and you just happen to be here in town, or, that kind of a thing. So, yeah.
I don't think anybody's going to be offended if you have to be reminded, because as I get older, I've had ex-students come to me and say, hey, how you doing, bud? And I'm like, help me with the name.
Yeah.
And they graduated like 1998 or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're not offended. I mean, it's been 25 years.
No, people have been very gracious and understanding.
But I bet your schedule's pretty full.
Yes. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is trying to relearn the church, right? And the best way you relearn the church is by being around its people. And so we try to fill up my schedule with different events and lunches and dinners and breakfast with folks, and various meetings and life group fellowships. We're making the rounds for community events. We want to be a part of it all. And so,
well, one thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago was you wanted the church to be at the forefront of the community. Now, I could tell you one thing that has changed since you've been gone is that we have become, First Baptist and Pathways have become a place a lot of local stuff takes place other than church.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
We've hosted several things with the Chamber of Commerce, several things with the nonprofit, several things with BISD and things like that. So it isn't, we are part of the community a lot more than we were maybe 15 years ago, because as Burleson has grown, these things have grown in size and they need a space. And we and Pathway are really about the only two places that have that kind of space.
Yeah. So I've always thought, a question that I ask myself in church leadership is, if you were to announce that your doors were going to close, would the city protest?
Oh, I don't know about protest, but they'd miss us. I believe.
Yes.
I really do.
Would they miss you? Yeah. Would they be upset about it?
And another thing that's really grown is promises.
Yeah.
Debbie Beeman has done a great job with that.
She's a fantastic leader.
And she's been on the show about half a dozen times. And in fact, it was her about a month ago said, you got to get Wigley on the show. Anyway, she comes on.
Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah. She gets on here about once a quarter.
Yeah.
And she's really good, not just at organizing and all that, but she's really done really well at getting the church more involved in supporting promises. I know that I don't say this for my own credit, but God has really put on my heart and Robin's heart to support promises better than we have. And I think a lot of it has to do with me sitting here talking to Debbie.
Yes. You can't help but hear the ministry that they do and not have a heartfelt passion for it.
Well, we have 4 people in our Sunday school class, including Cindy, that are part of Promises.
Yeah.
And so we hear the stories.
Yeah.
And we hear, just a side note, another thing that's really improved greatly since you left also is the coordination between all the nonprofits. Harvest House, Crazy Eights with Lisa Schwartz, Next Step Women's Center with Summer and Megan. Yeah. I keep calling her Hollowell, but it's Swearingen.
She will forever be Megan Hollowell.
Yeah, I know. And
I know it's Swearingen.
Yeah,
and they're starting a church too in town. She and her husband Chad.
Yeah, they've been on the show numerous times.
Yeah,
and one of my blessings is doing this podcast. I get to sit in a chair and see all this from a global view.
Yeah,
all these groups are working for the community and with each other, and it's there's no rivalries. It's not like $1 to Next Step is resented by some other group or whatever. It's all like it's all in the same pot kind of thing, and it's a great thing. In fact, this is about 3 months away, but late September, have the Texas Thursday National Giving Day or whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
We all meet at Gina's for the
Okay.
show, and they each get like 8 or 9 minutes, and so they just rotate off and on the show, and it's the best show I do all year.
That's awesome.
It's a blessing.
There's some great work being done in this community.
And there's some people in our church that are doing some great things.
Yes, there are.
And to say it goes unnoticed, it doesn't go unnoticed by the one that really counts, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
You know,
We don't do it for our glory, right? But for the glory of God.
Probably one of the most impactful anecdotes in Scripture was the widow's mites,
Yeah.
because they'll tell you, the nonprofits and the churches will tell you, don't be intimidated by the fact that you can't give $10,000. You got
Right.
$10.
It's huge.
Well, yeah, it's huge. It could be $10 could be really difficult to come by.
Yep.
Whereas for $10,000, somebody else, it's like
It's
rounding error.
$10.
So that's what I tell the people when we do these nonprofit shows. Don't let the fact that you can't just drop $100,000 on them deter you from dropping $25 on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every bit matters.
Yeah.
And especially now as we're living in a time where there's increased cost. I know Promises is feeling the heat of that.
Boy, are they.
And so $10 helps purchase more than what we were planning to purchase. And so
Yeah.
that's a great thing.
Yeah, and so I've been really blessed by the fact I could see all these groups work together. And
Yeah.
I guess for you, it's the same thing. Globally, you could see how First Baptist impacts the community. And I know you and the Mayor Chris Fletcher, have talked about.
Yep. Great guy.
Yeah, he's been on the show several times.
Yeah.
And the last 2 or 3 years have been really good governance for city. We had early 2020s, we had some head knocking going on, and it got to
Right.
be kind of unpleasant.
yeah.
But the last few years, he and the council have really, really worked well together. And I've gotten to know him pretty well, and he's a genuinely decent person.
Yeah, he really is.
And so that helps. But I know that you have some big plans. I'll let him talk about it when y'all have got them more off the ground. But I know you want to make First Burleson prominent, not for its own sake, but for what it can do for the community.
I thought you were going to say make First Burleson great again.
No. Because it's all, yeah, you like that. Yeah,
No,
we try to keep
it's always been great, right? It's always been great. No,
the church is as great as the people in it, isn't it?
that's right.
And there's been a lot of great people at First Baptist that I've been a member since '91, and gosh, some of the people I've seen there are just solid gold.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
Well, I will tell you this, Brad, in all seriousness, whenever I think about the church, the church isn't a building, it's a people. And so you're right on track when you say that. But also the church as a big C church, a universal church, we are brothers and sisters in Christ trying to advance the kingdom of God. And so we ought to work together. And there are people that will come to our church that won't go to others, and there's people that will go to others that would never come to our church. And so I think we should pray for one another and support one another in each of our missions.
well, like Pathway and us, we haven't changed our theology, but we don't emphasize like our connection with the Baptist group. I mean, we are Baptist, absolutely, but that's not really how we promote ourselves. We promote ourselves as a community of Christians.
Yeah.
And that's what Pathway does too. They used to be Presbyterian. I don't know if they're still connected with them in any fashion. But
Yeah, I don't know anything.
I don't know, and I'm not going to speculate, but I'm just saying that's not how they identify in the community, and that's how we don't we identify as First Burleson, and that we're a community of believers that are Baptist as well.
Right, that's right, that's right.
And so, because, a lot of people get hung up with those titles,
Yeah.
and they had a experience maybe when they were in kid or young 20s with a Baptist church or a Baptist person, and that's turned them off that name.
Yeah.
And you don't want that to be an impediment for them to come to church.
No, absolutely. We want to be a place for, whenever I think about, you're starting to talk about, how do I envision church? I really think that, we have an opportunity to be a church for multiple generations. And I love that fact, to be a generational church, multi-generational church that makes a difference for the kingdom. And so I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that and to lead the church in that direction.
I know you can't predict the future. You are open to what God calls, but do you see yourself retiring in this church if it was up to you?
Yeah, man, I see myself running about for 20 years, and and then maybe getting into some sort of a church transition deal or teaching type deal. But listen, I wouldn't come here if moving is terrible.
Yes, it is.
And so I don't want to be here for 3 years and not really get invested. And so in my mind, I'm here for 20.
Well, you could do my funeral then. All right.
I hope not.
Well, no, I'm not going to live to be 100. I know that much.
We'll leave that for the next pastor.
No, I don't know about that. But anyway, there's a couple other little spots I want to run. I'm sure you're familiar with The Journey, 88.3.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
the guy's name is
Rich Hooper.
Rich.
Have you? I talked to him a couple of times. He's been on the show. I email with him a lot, or text with him, but he's been on the show. He's also out of town a lot, doggone him. But it's a station out of Keene, right?
Yep.
And,
right.
All right. And I don't know if they were prominent 10 years ago, but they've grown. They're trying to increase their reach.
Yep.
And so he has promoted your appearance here. We kind of self-promote or
that's awesome.
cross-promote. That's the word.
Yeah.
So his listeners are aware that you're on the show today, and so they'll pick it up when they can. Most people, like I said, they see the show on their time, not my time.
Yeah.
So they'll, I've had shows where I've looked at it like 24 hours later and say, ooh, that didn't do anything. And then I'll look at 72 hours and the numbers are pretty good.
Yeah.
Or
right.
I've had vice versa.
Right.
So you really can't tell.
Right.
But anyway, he's been promoting it. And also, this will be on tonight at 7 o'clock on my radio station. It's an online radio station. I started this about 4 months ago. It's on TuneIn and Live 365. And I usually have links in my Facebook page and other pages. But it's going to be on tonight and also 1 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Awesome.
And so people who are driving around or they've got it on their laptop or they're doing other things, they can listen to it. It's not church music, though. It's 60s through 80s hits.
Awesome.
Yeah.
The 80s were the best decade ever, in my opinion. Tight rolled pants.
Yeah, right.
Big hair bands.
I got that on the station. Actually, but I do have some sections I do put, not hymns, but Christian-based music. One of the segments put together was secular artists doing Christian music, like Bob Dylan.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Bob Dylan, my favorite album is when I came out in a junior and high school and he did a Christian album. Did about 3 of them.
Really?
Yeah. Slow Train Coming. Oh, it's a great album. And also like U2 and Van Morrison and, these guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so Live 365, tune in, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell the Queen. Anyway, tomorrow, I could use your prayers now. I'm going to try to make sense of this business in Iran. A lot of emotions are running pretty high.
That's tough, yeah.
Yeah, should we have done that? Should we have not have done that? That kind of thing. So I'm going to try to look at it objectively, and so I'll make both sides mad.
Well, I look forward to tuning in.
All right. I always let the guests have the last word, so what would you like to say?
Man, Brad, I'm so proud of you, and it's so good to be back in Burleson, and looking forward to being a part of what the Lord is doing here, man. It's going to be great.
Do you want to do this again?
Let's do it again.
How about sometime in the fall?
Let's do it. I'd love to.
Because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of stuff. I have a couple other acquaintances from other churches, and they use this platform to talk about their Easter services.
Sure.
You met one at the coffee shop, the associate pastor. Daniel Boland.
At Graceview.
Graceview, yeah. When they have stuff, they'll tell me, and I'll say, hey, if you're looking for Vacation Bible School, for example.
Yeah.
We got that coming up in about a month, and no, I'm not volunteering. So
oh, come on, man. Now's the time for you to volunteer.
No.
Yeah, July 21st through the 25th.
Yeah, you're competing with the Methodists,
24th.
Same time, same,
I tell you what, when you have a bunch of churches here, you're going to wind up on the same.
There's no question about it, so that's all right. A little competition. It's funny, when I was a kid, I was Methodist one week, Presbyterian the next week, Lutheran the next week. It depends who had Vacation Bible School.
Yeah, right.
My mom was going to send me to them.
Yeah, right.
You go to Vacation Bible School, Josh, when you were a kid?
Long time ago. But yes.
Yeah, you remember. Yeah. All right, the cookies and Kool-Aid. I remember that.
I remember it
Yes.
well.
And the music and the crafts.
And the crafts and the kickball or whatever.
The kickball or whatever recreation was available.
I'm glad you're here. I'm not just
Thank
on the
you,
show,
Brad.
but I'm glad you're here in Burleson. We're going to be very well blessed by your presence.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate
and
that.
And tell Kathy that we feel her pain.
Well, I know she would covet your prayers for more than just moving, the fact that she has to be married to me. So
It's a smooth ride all the way.
yeah.
Hey, we know. All right, like I said, 11 o'clock tomorrow, and I'll give you all the answers about Iran. You don't want to miss that. So we'll see y'all then.